businesses, people try to save money, try to handle it themselves.
Sure. Yeah.
And you've seen it before because it's like you can either pay me now or pay me later.
Right, right. Well, there's different types of bankruptcy. The Chapter 7 is a little easier. I have seen people do that. It still wouldn't recommend it, but I have seen people bumble their way through it.
Tell everybody what Chapter 7 is.
Yeah, Chapter 7 is, that's the bankruptcy where you have to, you basically walk away from everything. If you don't want to save anything and you make, in general terms, under about $45,000 a year, you can typically qualify for a Chapter 7, and that's basically when you want to walk away from everything.
Okay.
So that bankruptcy is a little simpler, and so I've seen, people can, they can bumble their way through it, but it's not.
Can you do Chapter 7 if you own a house?
You can if you want to surrender the house. Sure.
So you got to surrender it, though. Okay.
Yeah.
You can't just make that part of. You got to surrender the house. What about your car?
Well, let me back up. You can keep your house if you're caught up on your house.
Okay.
And you want to continue making payments on it, then yes, you can enter into what's called a reaffirmation agreement with your mortgage company. Basically, when you file any type of bankruptcy, you're granted, if you follow the bankruptcy rules and regulations, you're granted a discharge of all debts that qualify as dischargeable. So one of those debts would be your mortgage debt. So you're discharged of that debt, and this is, believe it or not, I've seen people think, well, okay, now that I'm discharged of the debt, I don't owe you any money, but I still get to keep the house. But you don't get to keep the house because that house is collateral for the debt.
Right.
So in order to, you could file a Chapter 7, discharge the mortgage debt. You would have to then reaffirm the debt, which is a document you would sign after you filed the bankruptcy. And that's where you would say, well, I can be discharged of this debt, but I choose to keep paying because I want to keep the house. So it is possible. Typically, though, people that file bankruptcy are behind on all their debts. So if you file a Chapter 7 and you're behind on your mortgage, unless you can somehow catch up, and that's why a Chapter 13, which includes a payment plan. Okay, so, and that's where your first question, can you file a bankruptcy on your own? It's extremely difficult, a Chapter 13. I have not seen anyone do that on their own because you have to not only the standard paperwork from a Chapter 7, but you also have to establish and propose a repayment plan for those creditors that are required to be repaid, and different creditors, depending on whether they're secured or unsecured, priority or non-priority, it gets complicated, and so you treat different creditors different ways, and you come up with a monthly payment plan based upon which creditors fall where. So that's extremely difficult. I have seen people do a Chapter 7, but again, it's really not that.
How is that figured out, though? Is there a guideline? Is there a plan what you can pay back on the Chapter 13?
Typically,
I mean, it can't tell you if you can pay back $5,000 a month when you don't even make but $2,000 a month. What does a person do with Chapter 13?
Well, that's a good question. It has to do with feasibility. In other words, once you figure out what your payment plan is, if you can't fulfill it, then you have to start giving up assets. Right?
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, you can do a plan and say I'm going to pay $3,000 a month, but if your income's $1,000 a month,
right?
Well, then you're not gonna make the payments, and it's you have to make the payments on time every month. If you don't, you get dismissed. The court will dismiss your case.
So everything that was done for you is just thrown out the window. Okay.
Right. So, part of what I would do to qualify somebody if they came to meet with me, I would look at their income and I'd say, I'd give them an estimate. Here's what I think your monthly payment will be. Doesn't look like you can make this payment, so we need to start giving up some stuff. Give up your car.
That's how it works.
And maybe you have to give up your house or whatever. It just depends. Usually most people don't give up their house. I mean, if they do a 13, that's typically the reason why you'd file it, in order to keep your house. Also, as far as the 13 goes, you typically, what you have to do, and people, this is important too, because you typically, in a 13, you get 5 years to catch up, basically, up to 5 years. So whatever your past due is, you divide that by 60, and you have to pay that, but you also have to pay your regular payments. So if your house payment's $2,000 a month and you're $60,000 behind, okay, then say 30 months behind, $2,000 a month. So you have to pay your regular $2,000 a month payment,
And
then you
the
also
2,000.
you have to pay another
So now
$1,000 a
it's-
month
right
to
now
pay back your
3,000.
right,
And that's just
right.
on the house.
Right. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
It seems like it's better to go the Chapter 7.
Well, it depends. I mean, the Chapter 7, you have to make less money than
Okay.
half the people in the county in which you live. So that's
It's
why I
based
say
on
around
the county you live in?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a median income. I say around 45,000 is kind of again. It's
Is there a
it's going
difference
to vary.
between Palm Beach County and Broward County?
Yeah, slightly, but it's
Okay.
not much. So I tell people, around 45. But if you're close to that, then you definitely want to speak to an attorney and get, specifics. Also, if you have dependents, you can make more money. It's based on household income, too. So it can get kind of complicated. But for an individual, if they make, 80, 90 grand a year, they're not going to file a Chapter 7. It's just not going to happen.
When is the right time to call you? Because like some people say, wow, you're going to file bankruptcy, like you're some criminal. I mean, I would not be embarrassed to file for bankruptcy nowadays. But when is the right time?
Really, anytime. I mean, you pretty much, if you're having trouble sleeping, you can't pay your
That's
debts,
it. Okay.
that's a good time to call an attorney.
Can't write that.
I get people calling me and just, have general questions. But usually it's, you're falling behind. Actually, I've had people that know they're not going to be able to pay, in a few months. They're paid up, everything's caught up, but they see it coming. They know, they've lost a job or whatever.
And they would know that.
Well, if you lost a job, or maybe if you get sick, maybe,
Right. Oh,
and
yeah.
and you're not going to be able to work again, and you've always paid your bills on time, but now you're going to have trouble. So yeah, I mean, but people usually know when to call. Know when to call. Yeah, usually know when to call.
Especially when you can't sleep. Yeah,
Well, yeah, that's
So, do you charge for a consultation?
no charge for a consultation.
Okay, so they come in and sit. What is it? How long does it take you to know the route that you want to take, that they should take?
Not long.
Is it 30
I mean,
minutes,
I usually
15?
no, 5 minutes. I mean, I talk to people on the phone and I can get a pretty good idea. Oftentimes I deal with people on the phone and then I send them the paperwork and they fill it out. Probably 1 out of 3 clients, I don't even meet with them.
Wow.
It's all done online.
Right.
They said, but I'm happy to meet with people. And some cases are more complicated than others, so I will meet. I'll say, look, you need to come in. Or some people just want to meet me, and that's fine too. But it doesn't take more than 5 minutes. I can figure out.
See, we've
pretty
done.
much.
I think this is our 4th or 5th show. I would feel comfortable coming in, talking to you. You say this is the route we're going to go. I would feel more. I would be able to sleep that night. Hey, I've got a plan now.
Oh yeah.
I didn't have a plan yesterday.
Oh yeah.
And it's kind of I think it's your demeanor, the way you come across is really, I mean, it's caring,
Yes.
but
Sure.
you're educated because this is mostly all you do.
Yeah, well,
is bankruptcy.
I do debt collection. I also do defense, and then I do foreclosures, and I do commercial litigation.
But
too.
it's kind of still all in the same, the bankruptcy
it's
and
business
loan
litigation.
modification. Right.
Really, foreclosures, real estate litigation, and business litigation. And then from the foreclosures, there's a lot of bankruptcies. A lot of people go into bankruptcy there from the foreclosures.
So we have a lot of business owners that listen to the show. So you also handle business owners
Sure.
about taking the business into bankruptcy.
Right, sure. Yeah.
Is that a different type bankruptcy?
Yeah, that's a whole different ballgame. And that's
Because you hear about these companies that have 2 years to work things out.
Right. It's the same, yeah, and those cases are, you definitely would need to meet somebody. Those cases
Yes.
are extremely complicated, and they're very expensive. Chapter 11, it's called a Chapter 11 reorganization. It's
Reorganization.
it's like a 13 is considered a reorganization where you do the 5-year payment plan. Chapter 11's for a business, and it gets very complicated because when you're, typically when you're dealing with a business, one thing you see oftentimes is commingling of funds. The business, and again, if I'm dealing with, smaller businesses, closely held, not Fortune 500 company,
Right.
but, smaller held businesses, when money starts getting tight, you stop paying yourself the salary, you start commingling funds, you start paying bills out of your personal accounts. It can be a real mess.
Wow.
So so the 11 is there. But again, that's just a whole different ballgame. There's also a Chapter 7 for businesses, which is not, which is similar to its Chapter 7 for personal. It's basically it's called a liquidation, where you just basically say, here are my assets, here are my debts, I'm walking away. And again, you have to qualify, but if you
Right.
do, it's pretty simple. Here it is. You figure it out. I'm
Now,
done.
we had someone ask us about homestead.
Okay.
Does Florida
okay.
have
Sure.
homestead laws?
Oh, yeah. Homestead is just excellent in Florida. The great thing about Florida homestead is it's unlimited. You could have a $10 million house, and your creditors can't come after it. Now, there are some exceptions, obviously.
But do you have to live in Florida? Because I have a feeling this is a person who also lives in another state and comes back here 6 months out of the year.
Well, it's confusing. First of all, there's different definitions of homestead. And there's also different ways that homestead is addressed. It's a pretty complex issue. But to simplify it, if you're filing for bankruptcy and you want to get a homestead exemption, which means you keep your house. And again, if you owe money on your house, that's a whole different ballgame.
Let's assume you own 2 houses, though.
Well, you can only have one homestead.
Okay.
So and it's got to be your primary residence, yeah. Okay,
and what's considered your primary residence? Is it about how long you lived there?
Well, yeah, if you live here more than, again, it can get complicated as well. So if you have somebody living
Snowbird, they have a house in New York and they have one here. What is considered their homestead?
If they live here more than half the year and they intend to permanently continue to live here, then they can claim this is their homestead. Yeah, but again, I don't want to say for sure. It can be complicated,
Okay.
So when you're dealing with a snowbird, it's a case by case basis. But
I'm sure.
In general, let's just assume. I think it's important for the listeners to understand that with a homestead, there's 3 different issues involved. But one is a homestead. As soon as you move into a home in Florida with the intent to reside there permanently, that becomes your homestead.
Okay.
Okay. Immediately. Now, if you file for bankruptcy, let me back up. So that becomes your homestead, and that means if somebody sues you and gets $1 million judgment, even though you owe nothing on your house, they cannot take your house.
Okay. Now, that's your homestead.
It's your homestead. Unlimited homestead in Florida. Not many states have that. Unlimited. Now, if you file for bankruptcy, it's a little different. They changed the law back in 2005 to discourage people from moving to states with generous homesteads. Yeah. So in that, if you're filing for bankruptcy and you want to keep your house from creditors, you have to have lived in the house in Florida for at least 3.5 years. I think it's 40 months. So
the
3.5 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 3.5 years of permanent residency. And now you can get up to, I think, about 150,000 exemption. But anything over that, if you've been here less than 3.5 years, it's not protected from creditors. That's different than just, if you're not filing for bankruptcy, your homestead, unlimited homestead, attaches immediately. So let's say somebody sues you and gets $1 million judgment against you. You immediately, and you have $1 million in the bank or whatever, $10 million in the bank. You take all that money, move to Florida, buy a house. There's nothing wrong with that. That money's protected. Even though that judgment creditor, follows you and tries to collect.
That's the reason why a lot of people move to Florida.
Yeah,
now.
Absolutely.
Wow,
absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But again, in bankruptcy, just to be clear, it's a little different. You have some residency requirements in bankruptcy, but straight homestead, immediate.
Now, can these creditors, can they garnish your account?
Your bank account?
Yeah.
Yeah, your bank account can be garnished, but you have to be given notice, and you can claim exemptions. The funny thing about garnishment, though, is I say you have to be given notice, but you're only given notice after the bank is given notice because...
Well, that doesn't help.
Well, right, but if you were given notice before, what would you do?
Right.
You'd go to the bank and take out all your money.
And actually, what I'm trying to tell people is, if it looks like you're going to have to file bankruptcy, don't try to handle this yourself. No. We talked about this the last time on the show, because it's going to end up costing you so much more in the long run. Yeah. And there's things that you need to be talking to the courts about that they should not be talking to the court.
I mean, I don't see that. I mean, I get calls from people. Well, anytime they file a 13, they're always they can't do it. So they call me.
Right.
And I mean, sometimes I charge them more than they would have paid me normally because I have to undo the mess that they created.
Yeah. Right.
And then on the 7, it just depends. You got to be careful. Here's the problem with the 7, which people don't know. If you file it on your own and you mess up, you can't dismiss it. The court has to. Now, 13, you can mess up and just dismiss.
Okay.
7, you cannot dismiss it. Once you file, now the court, the trustee, which is an attorney appointed by the court, really step into the shoes of the creditor. They also step into your shoes as the debtor. So everything you own, they now own. And if you file a Chapter 7 and you think that certain assets of yours are exempt and they're not, well, now the trustee has the right to and will absolutely take your assets and sell them. Let's say, you know, people think it's funny. So often when I ask people, you know, they call me, they're in trouble. I say, okay, well,
all your people call you in trouble.
Yeah, usually they call me. So I say, what are your debts? And then I say, well, do you own any cars? They say, yeah, I own a car, but I don't own anything on that. But that's not necessarily a good thing. You know,
right.
If you have a car that's worth $10,000 and you don't own anything on it, that's an asset of yours.
Exactly.
And
They're
your creditors have a right in bankruptcy to say, wait a minute, sell that car to pay me what you owe me. Now, you get exemptions. You get up to $1,000 exemption, but there's another $9,000 there. And there's other exemptions, too, that might apply, but the most you're going to get on anything other than a house in Florida is $5,000 worth of exemptions. So let's just say you have a $10,000 car. Yeah, the exemptions in Florida are low because the homestead's so high. So you get $5,000. You own a $10,000 car, whatever, or any money in the bank. After $5,000, everything you lose it all. And so the trustee, so you don't. That's when you want to file a Chapter 13 because you can adjust it and you can anticipate that. So you have to be careful too. I've seen where people file a Chapter 7 and then they lose assets because they didn't understand what they were doing. And the trustee, by the way, in Chapter 7, the way that a substantial portion of their income is based on a commission on property that they sell it's their incentive to take your property and sell it if they can. Again, that's why when you meet with me as an attorney, I'm going to say, look, you're going to lose this to the trustee. Let's deal with it.
We got to go to break.
Okay.
Because, I love talking to you about this. And when we come back, we got a person who has a question for you.
Okay. You got it.
The law firm of attorney Ed Shagady thanks the Ask the Experts show for selecting the firm as one of the finest bankruptcy firms in Palm Beach and Broward County. When it comes to filing Chapter 7 or 13, you should contact the offices of attorney Ed Shagady to handle filing your bankruptcy. Why should you call him when considering Chapter 13 or Chapter 7 bankruptcy? At the law offices of Ed Shagady, you receive personal, direct service from Broward County Attorney Edward Shagady. You are not handed off to junior staff under the supervision of an attorney like large firms. Edward Shagady will personally help you through the complicated bankruptcy process. They are committed to taking a full-service, aggressive, and innovative approach to each client's unique personal and business needs, and are prepared to help stop embarrassing creditor harassment the day you hire their firm. Call them today for a free bankruptcy attorney consultation. Evening and weekend appointments and low-down easy payment plans are available upon request. Call 954-442-1000.
We are back. We got a text message. I'm sitting here with attorney Ed Shagady. It's Shahady.
That's it.
And he's an attorney here anywhere in South Florida. Broward, Palm Beach, Dade, and I'm sure he goes other places too. Give everybody your phone number.
954-442-1000.
This question, I think it's a good question. So we just had someone who filed bankruptcy, Chapter 7.
Sure.
A year later, they found out they had a hospital bill that they owed. Sounds sizable. Can they go back to the bankruptcy court and add that to it?
Sure, yeah.
They can.
You reopen the case. There's a fee for that.
Is it a hassle?
No, it's not a hassle. You can reopen the case. You just have to spend some money. Cost you a few $100.
Okay. Do you have to go back through the bankruptcy court?
No, it's you basically reopen the case. It's a paperwork. Now, obviously, if it's a debt that the creditor wants to dispute that it's dischargeable, that's another thing.
Okay.
Not every debt's dischargeable, but assuming that it's a dischargeable debt and nobody says anything about it,
well, this apparently was a hospital bill.
Yeah. So what you do is you reopen the case. You notify that creditor that you're reopening the case and including them in the bankruptcy, and then they have an opportunity to object to the discharge or numerous other responses, just like in the regular bankruptcy.
What you've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
Do the creditors ever go to that? I guess when you're going before the bankruptcy judge,
Sometimes,
they
not
show
often.
up.
Well, not the only creditors I've ever had show up are going to be local. Typically, when you have businesses that have gone bad and you have partners that have loaned money, so local people or I've never had like a Chase Bank show up. They're only going to show up, but it's maybe 5% of the time, and the reason they show up is because when you appear at anytime you file bankruptcy, you have to appear at one meeting with the trustee. It's called a meeting of the creditors. So your creditors have an opportunity to question. You're under oath, and so an attorney for the creditor or the creditor themselves, I've never seen that, but somebody can show up and ask you questions. It's really like a free deposition. You're already under oath, and it doesn't cost anything other than sitting down and asking you the questions. So sometimes that happens, and it usually has to do with whether or not the debt is dischargeable, meaning, for instance, and again, this happens oftentimes with business partners. You and I invest money in a business, and we lose money, and then you go bankrupt. Well, did you loan money to the business, or did you steal money from the business? See, if you steal money, that's not dischargeable.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so oftentimes, if it's a business that's gone bad, your partners, they'll show up at the meeting, at the creditors meeting, and ask you questions because they're going to object to the discharge based on fraud or dishonest conduct or whatever else. So typically, and again, typically you're going to know that going in. In fact, I've had a long-time client just decide to file bankruptcy recently, and he had a business that went under. He and I were talking just today, and I said, yeah, well, those guys may show up. He said, sure. So you're going to know. I mean, the attorney, I'm going to say, hey, by the way, these people may show up. Funny story. I had well, not really funny, I guess. I shouldn't say that, but it was interesting in that there was a creditor showed up, and the debtor and the creditor started yelling at each other, started screaming at each other, and it was in a different language. And but the thing about the trustees meeting, there's no security there. There's no deputy there.
There's not?
Yeah, so we
And that's
postponed
a court.
it. Yeah, right. But and so we postponed it and then reset it, and there was a deputy there the second time. Yeah, the trustee had a deputy there. Yeah, because so it's one of those things you don't expect that to happen, but the attorney sat down at the creditor's table, asked the debtor questions. It was no problem. But then once he left the table and started walking out, he and his old business partner started screaming at each other, and it was pretty scary. So
wow.
Yeah, and then again, we had to postpone the meeting for another reason, anyways. And so when we came back, they had security there. So it typically it's no big deal.
You know what? This is not a cookie cutter. It seems like everybody is different. You can't say this is what's going to happen if you do Chapter 7. It depends on your assets or your lack of assets.
Well, that's why you want to hire an attorney. I mean, it's my job to make sure that when you go, well, first of all, to make sure that everything's filed properly and all your exemptions are properly listed. But also, when you go to that meeting, you don't want to have anything unexpected. If we show up and something weird happens, then I didn't do my job. It's my job to make it smooth. If there's an issue, hey, Mr. Client, Miss Client, this might be an issue. Be prepared for this. This is how we're going to deal with this. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but be ready. And so that's what my job is, to make sure all the paperwork's filled out right, and also make sure that that you're not surprised, that you're ready.
You ever see anybody pull up in a Maserati and they're in there by themselves with no attorney?
No, never seen that. I mean, most people,
Actually, if you don't have any assets or anything, and you're really just kind of, maybe you're older and you just want to start kind of fresh, there's really not a lot except for the filing of papers, right? Is that why a person would go in there without an attorney? Because to me, it seems like you don't want to do that.
It doesn't happen very often. Yeah, you're talking about, it's cost $1,000 maybe. That's what you're saving, and you're just the peace of mind of, and again, you can lose assets. I'll tell you what's unfortunate. I see oftentimes is older people typically they may get very limited. So Social Security, maybe they get $800,000 a month, but they not typically, but sometimes they'll have a chunk of money, maybe $20,000 set aside. Well, in Florida, because of the generous homestead exemption, you don't get much. Well, I told you, 5,000 at the
Right.
most, and so it's a real problem for somebody that's got money in the bank to file bankruptcy because they're gonna. Well, you have to make. We can do it, but you certainly don't want to file a 7 because you'll lose all that money.
Right.
You got to file a 13, and you have to. And there's ways to handle it, but it's got to
Ed
be.
Shagady, give everybody your phone number.
Yep, it's 954-442-1000.
And your website.
It's Shahady, Shahady, Shahady-law.com.
I'm so glad you're going to be back again next month. We've come to the end of another Ask the Expert show. We will be back next week with our HOA show. And everybody have a wonderful weekend. See you soon.
You done for the day?
Done for the day. But now...
Thanks for tuning